never smoke the dizzy, but we can always share some disease. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys. Miss Liz in the house. That's right. And we're on a roll tonight. We know issues with technology. And I have Dr. K in the back. She is sitting back there. And tonight we're going to have a heart-to-heart talk. And we're going to serve her tea. And her tea tonight is resilience through connection, post-traumatic growth, and beauty in expressing personal truth. That's the tea we serve in this house tonight. We're not serving no beverage. We are serving Dr. K's tea and her story and the book that we'll be talking about tonight. So we'll be popping that up as well. But before we get started, you guys all know how Miss Liz works. Get over to Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, YouTube, all of those good platforms. Give it a like, subscribe, and follow. And share these tea times, because these tea times do make a difference. Either with a family member, community, or somebody who's sitting next to you that you might just need a little picker up, or tell them to check out Miss Liz's tea, because we serve a different type here. So let's get started with disclaimer and intro, and then we're going to get Dr. K in the house. And her full name is Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison. And that's why we're calling her Dr. K. So let's get started with the disclaimer. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicated to sharing real life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. I'm Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the giving time of airing. All guest viewers and participants are responsible for using their own good judgment when considering any action or decision that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for therapeutical, legal, medical, or professional advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding this disclaimer or the content of this discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookymissliz@gmail.com, or check out my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. I, Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect those wishes and decision and welcome you back whenever you are ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness one cup at a time. Well, I want to welcome everyone back to another Tea Time, where real stories serve truth, healing, and humanity. Today, I have the honor of sharing this tea time with Dr. Kirsten Viola Harrison, trauma psychologist, author, and founder of Soul-Wise Solutions. Dr. Harrison's work reaches into the deepest parts of the human experience, trauma, identity, and the power of compassion. Her book, I, Sean, the story of a homeless intersex woman who inspired a community, is not just a story of one life. It's a mirror of what happens when courage meets truth and compassion becomes action. So take a breath and open your heart. This tea time invites us to sit with the unseen, to listen beyond judgment, and to discover how healing begins when we choose to see each other fully, human to human, heart to heart. Let me get Dr. K in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome, Dr. K. Hi.
Thank you. A pleasure to have tea with you.
You know, I always love getting all of your teas because I never know what's coming to the table until you guys come.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so beautiful and genuine and human, right?
So, Dr. K, I'm going to take you down the first rabbit hole of tonight. So,
Okay.
the first hole we're going to jump into, who was Dr. K as a little girl and who's Dr. K now?
Ooh, some similarities. Dr. K, as a little girl, was very into making sure everybody had a place to belong. I was that kid on the playground who, if I saw anyone sort of straggling, I'd bring them into the group. I've always had an open heart, a big heart. My dad used to say, "You can't save the world." And I'd always be like, "Well, I could try." And so I think part of that was because I had parents who had grown up in World War II. My mom was German, my dad is British, and all of the reading material I got in my household was all about people who had stories of survival, Anne Frank, and a lot of stories about slavery in the United States and just how people's courage and resilience got them through. So I think that early conditioning kind of like made me more aware of people and wanting to make sure that they always felt supported. So that was me as a child, and as an adult, I feel like I've just continued on that journey. I've had witnessed a lot of heartache. I've gone through heartbreak of my own. I had a brother that passed tragically in an accident when I was 22. He was 20. That was its own form of devastation, but also healing and learning about deepening awareness of people who'd had maybe near death experiences and people who had come back with more light and were learning to fight for your joy through the pain. So I feel like there's a lot of similarities still between that early child and that wish to just sort of let's go through this human experience together. Let's care about one another and elevate each other's experiences.
Well, Dr. K, the reason that I asked that question is because I'd like to know where the similarities are, right? There's some similarities as a child to adulthood. Like
Absolutely.
if we're told to be quiet as a child, we usually become speakers or advocates or, you
Yeah.
know, um,
Yeah.
and I just love that, you brought that into your adulthood, like the belonging.
Mhm.
Right from a young age, you knew, like, I want to feel belonged. I want others to feel belonged.
Yes.
And before we went live, we were talking about on how today is World Kindness Day,
Mm.
and you're going to be talking about kindness tonight and how your story and how the book came about. uh, I want to pull up the book and talk about the book a little
Uh-huh.
bit and give
Uh-huh.
everybody a little insight of the book, and then we'll get deeper into the book.
Okay, so for those of you watching on video, this is Shauna behind me on the poster. The book is I, Shauna, and it is the story of a homeless intersex woman who inspired a community. And she's a beautiful person. We moved to the community of La Jolla, California, and I didn't know she had lived here for 30 years as a male, as Sean, but she had lived homeless on cardboard for 8 of those years. And I didn't know any of this. All I knew was that I saw a very, very positive person every day, greeting everybody, very neighborly, very friendly, with very interesting kind of like personality and optimism. And one day, my ex husband was a former tennis pro who traveled the world and, coached at the majors, really into tennis. And we saw Sean at the tennis court. So my husband was like, oh, maybe one day I'll have a match with this person. Well, about a month later, we all of a sudden saw Sean, but all of a sudden as Shauna with a beautiful flowy wig, a pink bikini top, a skirt. And I was like, oh, I didn't see that coming. So I asked the Starbucks person and I just said, do you know this person? I would love to buy her a drink. What does she usually drink? And so the psychologist in me and the humanitarian in me were just very curious. And I just started striking up a bunch of conversations with Shauna. Never knew she was unhoused, but started to get some awareness. But maybe there'd been some mental struggles. The therapist in me obviously recognized that, but I just started bringing her some clothing. I said, "Oh, my daughter might have some really cool Lululemon leggings you might like," and we started having that kind of exchange. Well, over time it became more apparent to me that maybe she didn't have a place of employment and she was hanging out a lot on the streets. And sometimes I would hear her really get agitated. And then I would just sort of calm her down and say, hey, Shauna, how are you? And she would calm down. So I started telling people in the community, hey, instead of getting a little scared sometimes, why don't you just say, hey, Shauna? And people started following suit. And so fast forward to one night I was at the grocery store really late. It was pouring rain, and all of a sudden I saw her shivering outside. And I was like, okay, something's up here. She must not have shelter. And so I asked her, hey, do you have shelter? And she said, no, ma'am. And I said, would you like to stay at a hotel for tonight while I help you try to figure this out? And of course, she like almost fell to her knees and she said, bless, like, this is so great. Thank you. And then after that, I got her settled, which was no easy feat. I then called the local paper from the grocery store parking lot at like midnight now. And I just left a long message and I said, hey, you guys know this person in the community. She's obviously a gem. She makes everybody smile. Like, can we please help her? There's something new back in the day called GoFundMe. I would like to run a GoFundMe in the paper. So long story short, we got $11,000 from that. I got an angel investor for another $15,000, immediately got her off the streets into housing. And that lasted 2 years. And then after that, for the last 8, I've been supporting her on my own. And we've been writing this book. It took us like 8 years to write the book because it was a lot. I mean, COVID happened in there. I was raising 3 children, one with special needs, one with an insane soccer schedule. I had a life-threatening illness in there. Like, a lot of drama was happening in the kind of periphery. But we got the book done. She's lived in Palm Springs for the last 7 years. Because she just loves the peace and quiet. She walks a half a marathon a day. It's her non-medicated way of treating her schizophrenia, where she can, in the mid-air, just sort of like talk it all out, scream it out if she needs to, very late at night, and then she just walks, and then she just keeps going. So I think she's on like 900 and maybe like 80 walks out of 1,000 consecutively of a half a marathon a day. And so it's just amazing. I mean, her story of resilience. I mean, the more I dug deep into her story, once we decided we would write the book, is just incredible. Like, how she would wake up every day curious and just say, I knew hope was around the corner. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew something was going to happen. And she observed the kindness of strangers, people putting a little money by her bed at night, people giving her a little shampoo. It's just beautiful how many people, the local fish shop giving her a little cup of clam chowder every night to keep, she said it kept my soul warm. The community really came together. But she had also really shown up for the community. She was always offering people, hey, can I help you with your errands? Can I wash your car? Can I do something for you? Sometimes she would just be sort of, I would call her like the community Walmart greeter, but for our whole community, where if there were tourists or anybody, she would just sort of start talking to them and say, hey, have you checked out this place? And maybe you should go here on your visit. And she's just such a wonderful person. So it's been my pleasure to get to know her as well as I have. I took her from a little, back in the Obama administration, they had what they called an Obama phone, which was a little lifeline for the homeless. It was a little flip phone. And so she would slowly, carefully try to, dial a number. Well, we took her from that to texting, to getting an iPhone, to now she's like queen of social media. She got 1 million views on TikTok and what's the other one? Instagram. And her little handle is Soulwise Team. So it's just been very heartening to watch her journey unfold. And as far as kindness and International Kindness Day, I mean, we can all do this. It's all these little steps that we can take just to enter someone else's world for a minute and try to be compassionate. And just, if nothing else, if you don't want to, give something or give money or what, any of that, that's controversial for some people, but you sure can give a smile. You sure can give just a little bit of sense of belonging and inclusion.
Well, and I had a guest back in season 1, the first year I did Tea Time, and we talked about the homelessness in Ottawa here and how people have stories. They're not just people on the street. They have a story,
Absolutely.
And when you reached out to me, I was like, absolutely, 100%. Let's get this story out there, right?
Yes, thank you.
And I noticed something on the website that it turned into a 10-year friendship.
Yeah.
So what did that 10-year friendship give both of you?
Well, I would say, I joke and I'm like, oh my gosh, getting her the iPhone, I get 1,000 texts a day. But honestly, she has become such an important part of my inner circle. And I would have never imagined that that mutuality would take place. But in 2019, I was diagnosed with, at the time, the doctors thought I had a year to live. And it was very traumatic. Obviously, I had children. It's a very hard thing to handle. And I still have an underlying condition, but it's not as dire as they thought after doing a biopsy, thank God. But I, every day, Shauna would say, I'm praying for you, doc. Like I've got my prayer angels ready. And every day sent me encouragement or sent me research or sent me a quote that let me know that I wasn't alone. And I thought, she's showing up for me in such a huge way. This was completely unexpected when I first became friends with her. And so taking a chance sometimes on somebody is just the biggest blessing. Like you can't imagine the return sometimes on investment of just kindness.
Well, Dr. K, that's, taking a chance on somebody
Yeah.
turns into a friendship, turns into a
Yes.
connection, turns into a lifeline, turns
Yes.
into a difference, right?
Yes.
It's the
Love
little
it.
things that we seem to forget in life. We're always
Yeah.
looking for the bigger picture, right? But
Yeah.
it starts off with that simple kindness.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was so she is intersex, which is a condition that we used to call hermaphrodite. So it's by anatomy and it's sort of ambiguous genitalia. It's often a lot more common than people realize. It's just that early intervention, usually doctors or parents might intervene and say, hey, can we just sort of correct this in surgery as a child, as a baby? So Shauna didn't really realize that she was straddling sort of like both worlds until she got a little bit older, but she always knew something was off. And so she never quite felt like she was sitting on solid ground in terms of just knowing even just her basic biology and like what her life was about. And then you add schizophrenia on there, which is a very destabilizing form of neurodivergence. And everything was up in the air for her. It was never quite like nothing. She said I was confused a lot, like nothing really made a lot of sense. And so the one thing she could count on, so she goes to 4 online churches a week. She counts on some faith and something grounding, something that really she could kind of feel like, okay, if nothing else makes sense to me, at least I know something much bigger is caring for me, holding me in that space. And so that kind of like, pushed her forward in terms of like, all right, well, if I can maybe hold on to taking a chance on people and I can maybe have a little hope that life's going to get a little bit better. And it just kind of got wider and bigger from there. So, in my middle-aged brain, I'm forgetting the question. Well,
No, it's all good. We're all getting older.
oh my goodness. Sometimes that happens. I'm like, where am I going? But there was something that sparked the whole situation of really, oh, I know what it was. There we wrote an op-ed for the under the Biden administration. They had done something with the Human Rights Commission at United Nations, and it was about really recognizing intersex peoples and really bringing it out in the front, like for the first time. And so we wrote an op-ed about how important that was, and how nowadays in our administration things seem to be going a little bit backwards in terms of recognizing people's just basic rights to exist and be themselves. And so that was a very proud moment for Shauna to be able to stand up for things like that and to be able to start to make a ripple effect of difference in these platforms that she's really passionate about. And then that was never my platform. I didn't know anything about intersex before I met Shauna, but I really follow her lead on that. And consequently, we ended up taking a trip. She'd never left the country in 59 years. We took a trip together for 3 weeks through Europe, through the Euro Pride parades in Portugal, the Pride Paris, Pride London, and then eventually to Iceland, which is very LGBT friendly. And she proudly represented the I, which is LGBTQIA, I for intersex. And so she has just had an amazing journey. And also all because we just decided to have this friendship, and we just decided to explore. Oh, that was it, the 10-year friendship. We decided to explore what it was like to enter each other's worlds in this way. She's also learned from me a lot about mental illness, a lot about trauma, PTSD. I think she started to have names for things that didn't make sense to her before. And so I've been able to offer that to her. But again, I've just been a friend. I've never been her clinician. So it's just been a really incredible, unexpected journey of just light and finding joy and spreading hope and realizing you're never alone. ever, never. Even when she thought she was the most alone on the street, she said, I never was alone. And there is always something new around the corner. She could not have predicted that night that I would somehow in a rainstorm leave my kids with my husband and say, I got to go to the grocery store. I don't know why. Was that God talking? I don't know why. And she was right there. And that's how it all started to happen. So, friendship is a beautiful thing. Showing up for each other in kindness is a beautiful thing.
Well, it's without the judgment, right? You just
Yeah.
got to know a
Yeah.
person without judging or trying to be
Yes.
confused about the situation. You were just teach me. And I
Yes.
think that's what we
Yes.
need to learn in humanity is let's start to learn from each other instead of judging each other.
Absolutely. That's beautifully stated. And I think witnessing each other's journeys, it's like she bore witness to some of the nights I was freaking out when I thought I was going to die in a year. And it was like, she would say, well, Doc, this is what I learned in my sermon. Or, hey, like, this is what kept me going when I was having my dark nights. And it was like, wow, this teaching is just so beautiful coming from such an unexpected source and yet so comforting. And I do truly believe that sometimes people who've had the most trauma also are our biggest like leaders, kind of telling us how we can get through these difficult moments in life. Hearing those voices in the margins and witnessing is beautiful.
I'm a strong believer in that too, Dr. K, is
Yeah.
people who have gone through a lot, we're here to be leaders to show
Yes.
people where the change needs to happen.
Absolutely.
We have to find our tribe in order to get that movement going,
Yes.
and it's not about division. It's not about labels. It's not about titles.
Yeah.
It's about getting to know each other as human beings.
Yes.
My platform
Yes.
is open for voices and stories.
Mhm.
Whether I understand it or not, all of my guests teach me something, Dr. K. And like you're teaching
Yeah.
me about Intersex because I
Yeah.
didn't know about it,
Yeah.
because there's so many different titles out there that we're not informed. It's like mental illness, right? We're given
Yes.
schizophrenia, bipolar,
Yeah.
depression, but we don't
Yeah.
understand the diagnosis until somebody takes the time to tell us and explain it to us and show us why we have these
Yeah.
effects.
Well, absolutely. And like with Intersex, when I said to Shauna, explain this to me as well. Why aren't we writing the book as they? They seems to be a popular thing. And she said, well, when I'm Sean, I'm fully Sean. I'm 50 years Sean, and I'm fully his life, his story. But when I'm Shauna, I'm also fully Shauna. And so I'm very much in her perspective and her life. And now this is her time to be out and free. And so I used to ask her, well, how do you then distinguish that between somebody who might be transgendered? And she said, that's a little different because their soul feels an unrest. Like somehow they just don't feel like they're showing up biologically in the body that their soul feels aligned to be. This is what she's saying. And she said that how I distinguish it is that they are maybe, let's say, in a male to female situation, that they are feeling misaligned and that it doesn't match. And so there's this quest to kind of show up as it matches. And so for her, it's a little different because she doesn't really feel like she has as much of a choice. It's sort of like she's Sean or she's Shauna, and she has to integrate trying to be both at all times. And so it was also an adaptive strategy when she was homeless. When she started becoming more Shauna, she got harassed less. The public was a little bit more kind to her. They were more willing to go out on a limb and help her. They were less scared of her, especially with her voices, because she's 6'5" and she's very muscular, African American. And so people tended as Sean to be a little bit more wary. So we've explored the whole gamut of it, and it's been fascinating. And then I also used to work with very severe childhood trauma survivors who had what they used to call multiple personality disorder. And in people who've had so much traumatic splitting, they sometimes have parts of self that are different genders. And so I was trying to ask her about that, and that was more of a protective mechanism. Well, if somebody was saying, oh, I abused you because you look so cute in that skirt, or some horrible perpetrator nonsense, then they thought, well, adaptively, if you're like 8 years old, you think, well, if I show up as a boy, if I'm really a boy, then that might not happen to me. And so you can see how all of these things can get confusing for people because there's an adaptive mechanism, there's secondary gain, there's social aspect, but there's also just this deep rooted biological and soul level, like needing to have this expression and congruency. So that's sort of the best way that I could maybe start to open
Yeah.
the conversation of, if people are trying to understand.
Well, Dr. K, I was diagnosed with multiple personality, schizophrenia, and DID, and all that because of
Mm.
so much trauma
Mhm.
in my life, right?
Yes, I'm
And
so sorry. Yeah, with the trauma.
after
Mhm.
I started doing counseling, the voices went away, and I got mad at my counselor, and my counselor said, "No, no, no, it's because you're getting strong. You're being okay. You're in a safe
Mhm.
space now, where before you were
Yes.
breaking into personalities because you didn't feel safe." So it's just exactly what you said, right?
Yeah.
You split into the male
Yeah.
because you feel safer as a male and female as a
Yeah.
female, you know.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
my DID, my dissociation disorder hasn't,
Uh-huh.
I haven't altered since 2009, uh, and that's because I'm constantly working on my healing journey and that.
Yes.
Now, do you
Yes.
feel like when you talk to Shauna and Sean, do they some
Uh-huh.
moments they feel like they don't want to talk about the other alter because they feel they're going to change in that moment?
Well, okay, so it's interesting because she has something that I have, it's very rare, but I've kind of like sort of informally diagnosed her with dissociative schizophrenia. So the schizophrenia part is much more biological. There's a biological basis, and the feel a little bit like they're coming from outside. Oftentimes in her paranoid schizophrenia, they would feel menacing. The dissociative part comes in with the trauma and traumatic that happened to her when she was homeless, things that might have happened when she was a child. And so hers is a little bit more of a confused presentation. It's not as open to insight as maybe DID and multiple personality is. I think in therapy, when you're a multiple, you have a lot of insight into the basis of the trauma. Once parts become co-conscious of each other, and once they start working together towards a little bit more of an integrative plan, then there seems to be a little bit more insight, and the therapy can work really well. And I used to tell people, don't worry. If there's a life threatening emergency or something happens, you will be able to harness those strengths again, just because the voices are a little bit more quiet right now, or you feel a little bit more like you're working together. Everything that about you as a child that helped to foster your survival is still 100% there. It's just not going to take over in a way that disrupts your life's path or functioning now, when you have to grow up with the body and be a little bit more like older in your presentation. And then one more thing that confuses people is that I've also worked with a lot of near death experiencers who have had maybe a cardiac arrest or an accident or something, and their souls have left the body. So whereas a multiple might say, "Oh, well, when my body was down there being abused, I was up playing with angel mommies on the playground. They kept me safe." And so somebody who has had maybe a cardiac arrest, they will also leave the body, and they will say, "I was up with the being of light. I was up, meeting deceased relatives." But either way, the soul has this protective function. And I don't believe personally, from how many people I've experienced these things through and with, that this is just a biological mechanism. I truly believe this is some sort of a spiritual gift from another realm, from non-locality and quantum physics. It's really profound how much of a shift that can happen in our energy when something more unseen is when we know that something more unseen is caring for us. And again, that goes back to kindness. It's like, if we know we're settled and secure, that something has our back at the moment of total surrender, then we can surrender into, okay, I might just go with the flow a little bit better, which then opens us up to being able to understand our fellow humans. So yeah, it gets very complex, but it's also unbelievably rich. And that's why I think so many synchronicities happen, that like when we were first checking in before we signed on, and how it was like this profound synchronicity just happened. And it was like, huh, interesting. Take note. Obviously, we were on some similar wavelength somewhere.
Right? And I
Yeah.
honestly believe that the universe brings people to me at
Yes.
a given moment, right? Just
Yes.
like you met Sean and Shauna, you know,
Yeah.
do you feel that a lot of because you work in the field of psychology,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
the multiple personality, DID,
Mhm.
schizophrenia,
Yeah.
are they like cousins and paired, and they have so much similarities that there's so many misdiagnoses going out?
So it's interesting because bipolar and schizophrenia is so much more brain based. I mean, in DID and multiplicity and in a lot of PTSD, PTSD has a lot of brain based stuff with the hyperarousal and startle. in the amygdala. However, the only thing super brain-based about multiplicity is the fact that maybe there's more of a tendency to be able to be susceptible to self-hypnosis types of things in certain parts of the brain, which then allow people to sort of like create these amnestic barriers to have the survival, kick in. So for example, if you have a trauma that happened, it will separate between the behavior, the affect, the emotion, the sensation, and the knowledge. And a lot of us, when we go through life, those things seem to be happening congruently. But in severe trauma, it's way too threatening and overwhelming for the child to experience all of that. So it has to get partitioned out. So in schizophrenia, for instance, it's a different kind of mechanism. They might just go through life and all of a sudden, like with Shauna, when I traveled with her, a lot of times she would say, guys, or no ma'am, stop, and she would be talking to people that she visually sees out there. In multiplicity, as it's much more internal, and to the outside observer, unless there's a very florid like regression into a childhood state or something, the outside person might not necessarily understand what's going on. It's a very like on purpose for survival, it's a very internal thing that's happening. So I'd say those are some like kind of big differences, but as a whole, they have a protective kind of survival based mechanism behind them. I know that when I was traveling with Shauna and we entered a very busy train station in London, people were starting to give her a lot of looks with her outfits and whatever, and she felt a little threatened, and immediately her symptoms got much more florid, much more loud, much more disorganized, to the point where someone came up to us and sort of shuffled us into this first class sort of like lounge area just for some quiet, because they could see that she was getting agitated. And I thought, this is interesting, because the whole time the only thing that changed was the environment that she all of a sudden perceived as threatening. And then somehow it all just kicked in and created a cascade of events. And that's, it's no different than a lot of our trauma-based reactions. A lot of the chronic PTSD that people have, you take a Vietnam vet to the fireworks and they're going to have a reaction usually to the sound and to the noise. And that's just like, it's like a physiological connection that's made. And then they have a response. But even with them, if you take them to a ranch and you work with horses, they can just start to calm their nervous system and realize, this horse is big enough to take a bullet for me. I feel pretty protected right now. I think I'm going to be able to feel calm. So it's all linked, and yet it's all beautifully distinct as well. And that's why it takes a really trained therapist to understand, okay, what exactly are we dealing with? And then what exactly can be helpful right now?
And Dr. K, has this book opened these conversations of these diagnoses?
Yes, for sure. Because there is a chapter in there about mental health, and there's also and I did bring in some of my dissertation research that talked about trauma and also comparing to the near-death experiencers, and then the gifts that they feel like they've brought back to teach, there's sort of this bridge, and I call it kind of an ally, a human divine connection, where it's like the near-death experiencers come back with so many joyous kind of experiences, and they keep putting perspective on this lifetime on earth. And the trauma survivor might not feel that way. They might feel like, well, what are you talking about? I was abused with spirituality, or I was abused and everything's so dark. And so somehow bridging those gaps in conversations can help enrich and enlighten the whole human experience. We need these polarities to be able to come to some sort of greater, deeper understanding. So yes, the book in that way, and also the synchronicity chapter, when I talked a lot about Shauna as sort of, I feel like she's a bit of a walking spirit. She just seems to have such a peace and knowingness about her, and that whenever somebody really is struggling, she seems to appear. And so I used to ask people in the community, like, how is that? Like, this is so synchronistic. And so, to the point where we would go to lunch together and talk about this, like, what are these Shauna experiences that everybody seems to have? So I asked Shauna one day, what is that? And she said, well, doc, I think that sometimes something bigger than me directs my feet where I need to be in front of somebody to remind them, because they're struggling that day, that we are all connected in something bigger. And I think that is profoundly beautiful. And she puts so much faith in that other realm that I think that that is something that can bring a lot of hope to people who have felt abandoned in their traumas, who have felt like even in their surrender, like where is God, or what is hope anymore? And I feel like just that deep trust and faith that in the end it's all going to make sense. We don't know it now. Also, there's something in a DID system called the internal self-helper. And I don't know if you've heard about this or read about it, but my mentor, the late Dr. Ralph Allison, who wrote The Spiritual Side to Multiple Personality Disorder, and he talked about how this internal self-helper is kind of like this very knowing and wise part inside that helps put all the stories together and helps navigate some of the healing for the rest of the parts that might be a little bit split off. And I feel like Shauna accesses that in her schizophrenia through the outside. And I feel like people with DID access that sort of seemingly from the inside. And so there's an overlap there as well.
So it's like an internal healing.
Yes, but it has it's like a human divine bridge. It has like like an otherworldly, like when you encounter it in therapy, it feels like the angels have entered the room. Like you just feel the shift of the energy. There's more of a calm, there's more of a rational approach, but it's like something much bigger than what's going on in the in the therapist client dyad. Something else is going on. Now, whether or not that is like an aspect of the Godhead, I mean, who knows? But I would venture to believe that it is, because it certainly feels very different in the energy.
Well, I think
And
the
it's
universe
hopeful.
brought you guys together because you're the
Yes.
psychologist, and she was the person dealing with it, and it was like
Yes.
the universe put you two together to tell this story so that we could have these
Yes.
conversations with other
Yes.
people who are struggling in silence. I have all types of listeners that listen to Tea
Yeah.
Time, and
Mm.
I like to get these conversations out there so that we can open the mind to understand a little bit more,
Yes.
right? And I open
Yes.
my book. My story is an open book for everything,
Mm.
right? Judge me if you want, because we're going to get judged no matter what, right? So
Yeah.
I'd rather be real and honest with everybody.
Yes.
And I'm learning a little bit tonight as well, Dr. K, about the disorders that I was diagnosed with. But then they slowly started checking them off. Oh, this is not what you have. This is what you have. This is, and then
Yeah.
my final diagnosis was conversion disorder
Mm.
because of severe trauma over and over and over again. I still have
Yeah.
the DID and the conversion
Mhm.
disorder, but they took off the schizophrenia, they took off the multiple personalities, and it was survival
Mm.
mode. It was surviving
Yeah.
something. Now, I feel that that's what Sean and Shauna were doing, was survival.
Yeah.
They were so
Mm.
confused and didn't understand what was happening in their own body that
Yes.
they just had to tell the story in their own unique way.
Yes, and it's interesting that you say that with conversion disorder, because back in the day with Freud and the psychoanalysts, conversion disorder was the language that you would use before they recognized the deep role of trauma. Women were, they were called hysterics and all of these different diagnoses, but conversion disorder was literally what was happening when something in Victorian society was very threatening for somebody to acknowledge or to understand, that then it would convert into a bodily symptom, or it would convert into like hysterical blindness, or all of a sudden somebody couldn't walk. But in reality, there was a trauma and a traumatic memory beneath that. And once Freud and his colleagues started to understand that, it shifted the narrative. Obviously, it took a while and it went back and forth. But that's sort of at the very basis of what happens when we have all these repressed traumatic experiences, and then how they start to come out in the body. So now we've come kind of full circle, because somatic experiencing and all of these somatic practitioners are now understanding how to heal those traumas through the body and what the body is expressing. And as Dr. Vanderkolk talks about so eloquently about the body keeping score, and then now all of these people who also practice energy work and Reiki, it's like we're finally getting it, that there's something that's happened that's been so sublimated and shunted and pushed down because the child was not able to tell, that the child started telling without talking. it was like all other aspects of the child's life were starting to make sense because of all these converted symptoms. So in reality, I don't want to say it doesn't matter your diagnosis, because the diagnosis helps people try to help direct some sort of therapy. But truly, it's not about your diagnosis as much as it is about all of the offerings that you can use and finding for yourself what you feel like really speaks to you and sticks. And I know for Shauna, movement therapy, walking helps regulate every aspect of her nervous system. She also has a lot of conversations on those walks, so she's getting a lot of social connection. And then she can text me all sorts of different things, and then we talk them through. So then that's sort of like talking therapy. It's just kind of like every little aspect that she's doing all day is finding her own way of creating a therapy that works for her. And without the movement, she wouldn't be able to get through her days. That's a very imperative kind of like thing for her biologically. For all of us, it looks differently. I mean, I love that you have this podcast. I love that you are sharing your spirit of openness and genuineness and getting people to help make the connections and understand, and to feel like we let go of all of the shame and judgment, and we're just trying to witness and include and also teach. You know, Shauna had a very severe stutter as a child, and she was very scared to ever kind of like open her mouth. She was scared. And then as soon as we started texting, she said, I love the world of texting. It's opening this whole nother realm for me to be able to express without
The
having
safety.
to. Yeah, the safety, exactly. So, you know, whatever realm works. So
I'm so glad that you understand what conversion disorder is, because
yeah,
a lot of doctors, as soon as you say that you have conversion
yeah.
disorder, they kind of look at you in a different way. Uh, I
Mm.
had one doctor tell me that I was crazy. He actually even put it on my document papers, and crazy in the head, because
Sorry.
there's no medical condition. Like, there's nothing to prove. I had lost feeling for my legs down from my hips for 6 months in 2005. I had to learn how to walk again. It was like the
Oh
brain
my
just
God.
shut off.
Yeah.
And then they were checking for MS, and then now they're checking again for MS because it does run in the family. Like,
Mm.
there was a lot of traumatic stuff, right? And
Yeah.
we're having this conversation, and I'm glad that Sean and Shauna brought this conversation to the table, because I want people to understand that conversion disorder is a disorder that we should be talking about, without judgment.
Yes, absolutely. And of course, the field has changed a lot. You've got your psychoanalysts, and you have your cognitive behaviorists. It's like there's so many different ways. It's like the elephant thing. There's so many different ways to describe what's going on. And again, it's about what resonates with you, what feels right. For some people, a certain approach, for other people, a different one. But also, things are very intertwined. There's a biopsychosocial aspect to every illness and every disorder that we talk about in the DSM. There is some biological component somewhere, whatever that may be. There's a psychological diathesis stress. There's a psychological trigger. Maybe it's the early environment. Maybe it was a trauma that happened later. And then there's a social environment and social functioning. So these are all really important aspects to help keep things a little bit more manageable, or to have things happen in a break. Like, for instance, Shauna's first psychotic break, where it became more apparent that she struggled, was in college. But that happens frequently, because in college you're away from your normal routines. You're having to make friends at a fast pace. There's a lot of stress that's associated with that. So it's kind of like also giving yourself kindness first, recognizing that your truth and what you feel inside is very valid, and not stopping until you have clinicians around you that understand. They don't have to agree with everything, but if they have an open heart to listen. They've done studies that say if you're a physician, 80% of what is going on with your client will be revealed to you if you just listen to what your client is telling you that they feel about themselves. And I think that is so true in mental health and physical health. If I say my heart's palpitating and I try to tell a cardiologist certain things, but they have a preconceived notion about my age, my weight, my gender, no, they're not listening. But if I say, this is how I feel when I run, this is how I feel when I'm eating chocolate, or this is how, that's when they can start putting the picture together, because I'm a physician of my own inside. And it's the same thing with therapy. It's the same thing.
And we talked about this afternoon with Terry. Just listen. just learn to
Yes.
listen.
Yes. Yes.
And
Yes.
don't be so fast to react or have the judgment or have the diagnosis or the
Yes.
assumption of what's going to fix somebody, because
Yes.
every healing journey is different. You
Yes.
know,
Mm.
Shauna's story, what opened your eyes as you got to know her?
I think so. I had a profound moment with her. We were in Paris and it was a little bit exhausting. We'd gone to all these pride parades and everything. We were just tired, travel, moving into hotels all the time. And I sat across from her in this beautiful department store called the Galerie Lafayette. So I don't know if you know it, but it's got this huge stained glass overhead. It's just gorgeous. And she just looked kind of just, a little bit tired. And so I said, Shauna, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you manage all of your inside things going on, all of the people that are constantly looking at you, judging you, all of the energy to take these walks. I was like, how do you do it? And she looked at me and I swear it was like from the bottom of her soul. And she said, you know what, Doc? I just do my best. I do my best to show up. I try to be positive every day. But thank you for seeing me. It is very exhausting sometimes. And that moment, that transcended any diagnosis, schizophrenia. It transcended anything. It was like human to human. There was a deep acknowledgement and witnessing of humanity and that we all struggle, but we're all trying to find ways to cope through. And so I would say moments like that are just so deep and rich and profound are moments that really stick out for me and also surprise me every time at their intensity and their ability to just remind me that we're all in this together and that we just need to keep trying to support each other and just the judgment just needs to go out the window because like you said with your episode on homelessness, everybody does have a story. Nobody's choosing this. They didn't say when they were 8, oh, I want to wake up one day and live on the streets. Of
Yeah.
course not. And there's a lot of, governmental issues that have happened to people and that's how they land out on the streets. So it's just kind of like, just remember that in these deep connections with people and stories, that validating that they have truly had the ability to survive the next day, that is a valiant effort in and of itself, no matter what the struggle has been.
And I think, Dr. K, we need to get more homeless stories out there. The reason,
Yes.
because like you said, we don't wake up at 8 years old and say, I want to be homeless when I'm 40.
Yes. Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
some homeless people that I've gotten
Yeah.
to meet that have incredible hearts and souls, but they were
Yes.
just tired of the society and the systems telling them who to be and what to be and when to show up and how to show up.
Yes.
That they just
Yes.
like, you know what? I'd rather just go on the street and not be
Yes.
known than to
Yeah.
be known their way.
Oh, I love that. That is a profound statement, what you just said. Oh my gosh, that is a profound statement. I would rather be known than to be known like their way. And there was a homeless, wonderful gentleman, much older gentleman in our community, and he never had shoes. And I always thought, okay, well, why don't I just bring him some shoes? I sized up his feet and I was like, here you go, here's some shoes. And he kind of looked at me like, I don't want your shoes. And I thought, well, I wonder what's going on. And then I found out from someone else who knew him, one of the people at the hotels that did the valet. And they said, he's one of those people with society. He's just chosen to live life a different way than what society would have him live. And so I thought, okay, I'll try one more attempt. I'll go to the garbage can and kind of put these shoes in the garbage because every day would forage through the garbage cans. And then maybe he'll think if he discovers them there, that it has a different message than someone coming in from society and giving him shoes. Because it was like I was trying to make him comfortable, but in his world, maybe he translated that into, well, you think I have to wear shoes just because everyone wears shoes? I mean, I don't know what it was. So it's like trying to find, and I don't know if he ever wore the shoes or took the shoes. I just kind of figured try one more little time to try to understand where someone might be coming from or get into their language or their world just a little bit more. But I've also kind of cautioned people. One of the things that drew me into Shauna was that I also had heard of other people who had known her and other people who could vouch for her character, because I certainly didn't want, my daughters in their 20s just going up to anybody thinking it's safe and maybe somebody's on some crazy drug or something. So that's not the message either. It's sort of like be safe, obviously, but don't just, try to be a day maker. Make somebody's day by little acts of kindness versus kind of just passing judgment or doing something that you know is not in a higher energy. It's not a virtue you'd be proud of if you kind of made somebody feel bad about themselves or compounded their problems. It's like, just do those little things that could just lift people up a little bit. We've all been through things, and these labels of, issues that nobody has any idea. There are homeless people, they saw their whole family die in a tragic accident, and they just shattered their ability to ever be able to cope. I mean, how can we not have compassion for that? You know? And so even people with, people say, oh, they're just addicted to alcohol and whatever. Well, it's like, why? That didn't just happen out of the blue, Again, they didn't say at 6, well, I want to spend the rest of my life being addicted to alcohol. Well, no, there's something that happened in there, combining the biology, the psychology, and the social aspects of life, and something triggered that. So yeah, I think.
But Dr. K, one thing I want to say is we're so fast to judge somebody on the street with an addiction, right? But why are we not judging people who live in homes who have addictions?
Or sometimes if those addictions turn into abusive behaviors and what,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, as soon as we put the word homeless in front of it, it's automatically they're bad people.
Yeah. Yeah.
But somebody who's living in a home or in a 4-story building or something, it's just it's a family generational thing. But as soon as they go on the street, they're no longer looked at as human beings.
Yes, that is exactly true. It's that humanity and that human factor that sort of gets removed, and then people feel like it's okay to then treat those people however they want to treat them. And I can't tell you the amount of times. I mean, we have a lot of homeless in San Diego. I mean, sometimes when I'm going somewhere and I happen to have things that I can give, and other times I literally just take a moment, meet eyes, and smile. And other times I can tell if that feels too intimate for somebody to sort of meet eyes and smile, then I just sort of, just kind of give a thumbs up. There's just something that I'll do to just sort of validate their sheer humanity and their right to take up space and exist. And I feel like this is not a big ask, and everything that you're saying is absolutely true, that it's like, in one context, it seems sort of okay and functional. We can have, the Boris Johnson, in England when he was prime minister, and have all sorts of struggles. And some people judged and other people understood, okay, he suffers from an addiction, but there's not the same kind of like vitriol that people experience when somebody is like on the street. So I agree. I applaud your effort to kind of make, homeless people feel, and unhoused people to feel some dignity. I would say, Shauna would say the biggest thing that's happened in her life in these 10 years is that she's got her dignity back.
Well, and it goes back to the shoes, you let him get them on his own terms.
Yes.
That's what it is. It's not that they enjoy dumpster diving. It's in their own safety, the space. We got to really start understanding mental illness. And I really hope in the future that we get to a place where we're not so fast to judge without understanding. Let's start understanding first.
Yes. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. You have great things.
I try to get my kids to understand that, just because they're homeless doesn't mean that they're not a nice person to talk to. Just like somebody who has a house and a roof over their head, they might not be a nice person to talk to. So you know what I mean? Follow your gut, follow your intuition. You're going to know if that person has something. Like you had that connection with Shauna that you're like, there's something more that I need to know. There's something I have to learn from this situation. I was put in this situation for a reason. You could have been walking down the next street and never have met Shauna, but you did because there was a reason for it.
Yes.
Now, do you and Shauna have any plans to turn this into a movie, to
write
a second book? Or, I got friends of friends.
I would love to make it into a movie. I feel like she's so larger than life in her energy and personality that I think that her energy on video and film is really, I would love that, because I think her story has so many layers to it, and it has like uplifting moments and healing and every layer and every level. I would love to start podcasting with her because she lives in Palm Springs, and she's a little hesitant with certain aspects of technology. Again, based on the paranoid schizophrenia, it plays a little bit of a role there. There's a reason she doesn't have a TV, things like that. But somehow that's not really triggered or activated from the iPhone. So there are creative ways to get her to do this. but that would be wonderful. That would be a goal. I would love more people to really become aware of her story and to spread the word of healing. She's an incredible human being, and I think she just can show that if you lead with faith and neighborliness and optimism, and try to always realize that we're no longer like, we don't have to be limited by our circumstances, that we can always believe that something can shift, and holding out that hope. And then you get somebody else walking by and they might be struck with that same sort of epiphany, and there you go, the
It's the
connection is
ripple
made.
effect, right? Of
Yeah.
breaking those stigmas and breaking that shame and that judgment.
Yeah.
I feel that Shauna's movie would make a beautiful movie for mental illness, to bring these diagnoses to the table that people do not talk about. We talk about depression and bipolar and BPD, but we don't talk about the other diagnoses as much as we should be talking.
Yes.
They need just as much of the table.
Well,
as
they
the rest of
do,
them.
because people are very fearful of schizophrenia. And so in the news, when something violent happens, people think, oh, yeah, schizophrenia, where it's not all that common for something violent to happen with schizophrenia. It's just sensationalized. And so my stepdaughter with special needs, there's a lot that I learned from her. She's 20, but cognitively more like 5. And so that how to approach her neurodivergence, like I used to tell her teachers, no, don't do it this way. If you talk about Elsa from Frozen and you enter her world that way, she'll totally get it. And so it's like just trying to learn how to best understand, and then not trigger all of these like cascade reactions of fear or worrying about like violence. And I'm not saying that, your person that you're talking about that has schizophrenia might not be able to be reactive, of course. However, there are also a lot of other people who don't have any of this, who are doing some really egregious things. So education really is key, and becoming friendly with people who have a different life's perspective. I think early experiences go a long way. When I went to World Pride with Shauna in Washington, D.C., she was raised in Columbia, Maryland. So we took a long extended 3-day trip to see all her old schools, to see where she grew up. And I really got to know, for the book, the part of the backstory. And what I learned was she came from a family where the dad was a pastor, instilled really good values. The mom was always trying to make sure that the kids had great education. We found her family and sister after 17 years of Shauna not having any access to her family or contact because she had been living on the streets. It's just kind of like really moving and beautiful when you let go of the stereotypes, and when you start to just see one person's story and journey at a time, and then use that to educate. We're going to go talk at UCLA to a lot of there's a pathway for kids that have been foster kids to some of these better universities. There's these pathways. And so part of their experience is to also learn what it's like from somebody like Shauna, who has fallen through the cracks and by some standards, and then how she can take her journey of healing and resilience. And this means so much to her because she has a 4-year college degree. She's a PE teacher certified in the state of California. So to be able to go back to the universities and now help the next generation is so heartening. And that couldn't happen, again, without just listening to the stories.
Yeah, absolutely. So where can people
Yeah.
find this book? And I have your website up, but if you could spell it for the audio listeners so they can check out the book, check out your work as well, and check out, just check you out, because I think that you have a lot to bring to the table, Dr. K.
Mhm.
You share it in a way that it's not like duh, 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 duh. It's
Yeah.
let's have some heart first before we get to the
some heart and some middle-aged brain fog. That always makes it comical. But
right. But I mean,
yeah.
let's get you out there so we can get people to see and get the book in that as well. So if you could spell out the website and what's coming next for you.
Okay, so the book can be at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, the usual. We would love for people to actually read the book, because there's so much heart and there's so many just wonderful messages of hope and healing and resilience in that. Thank you for that. And then my website is soulwisesolutions.com. So it's SOULWISESOLUTIONS.com. And that has a lot of Shauna's story. It has some of my story as a trauma psychologist. It has a lot of blog posts. It has, like, the mayor of Palm Springs is friends with Shauna, and she wrote a little synopsis about Shauna. And there are just moments like that. And there's some videos from like our handle is Soul Wise Team on Instagram and TikTok. And that gives you a real example of Shauna's flair and her personality and just joy, like her zest for life, her vitality. So if people are interested, that would be wonderful if you could find us.
And I wanted to pop up the book because I want people to see who Shauna is.
Yes, she's a beautiful spirit. She's wonderful. So it's just, this has been great. And I love how not just deep and educated and obviously personally heartfelt about these topics that you are, but you truly resonate, like we were saying, the kindness and the openness and the authenticity. And I think that that's what makes people want to tune into things like this, because you as a host are just completely modeling what you are saying that you believed in. And I'm really, after doing so many podcasts, I'm just really blown away by who you are. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. K. And thank you for sitting at my table and bringing this to attention. And I am so glad that you know what conversion disorder is.
Oh, yeah.
So many people are like, what is that? And I have people that call it conversation disorder. It's not conversation disorder, it's conversion disorder. But I think that people need to start looking into these disorders as well, right? And get to know them.
Absolutely.
And I love bringing topics like this to the table because we do not talk about it enough, and we need to start talking about it.
Yes, very, very true. Yes, very true. And in a very safe, friendly, empathic space where there's no judgment. It's just witnessing and belonging, you know?
Absolutely. So I'm just going to do a closing summary and we're going to wrap it up. And then I will see everybody back again tomorrow. That's right. It is a full week. Miss Liz has a tea time again tomorrow afternoon with the I Can coaching. So check that out with Jerry Lynn Darcy. He'll be in tomorrow. So tonight we had a profound and humbling tea time with Dr. K. Her words reminded us that trauma doesn't define us. How we rise from it does. She's shown us that empathy isn't something we talk about, it's something we live. In how we listen, how we speak, and how we hold space for another truth. Tonight, let her message echo softly within you. Every story matters. Every person deserves dignity, and healing begins the moment we choose compassion over comfort. Thank you, Dr. K, for sharing your light, your wisdom, and your humanity with us today. You truly poured a cup of awareness that will ripple far beyond this tea time. So thank you for that.
And thank you for sharing tea. I love it.